Welcome to Profiles in Eccentricity, a show about weirdos. With your hosts, John Fahey, Aaron Peter, and Matt Brousseau.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Profiles in Eccentricity. It's a show about weirdos, doggone it. My name is Johnboy. I'm your host, John Francis Fahey. Joining me, as ever, best-looking guy I know, Aaron Joseph Peter.
Thank you.
How are you, buddy?
Feeling pretty good. How about you?
I fucking feel great.
Great?
Great.
You smell
Wow.
great.
Thanks, man.
Now, to my 12 o'clock pretty much right now,
Kind of.
star of old school cinema, Squirt Man Blaster.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Burt Lancaster?
I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
No, I
Nice,
like it.
nice.
Had to really dig deep for that.
I'm behind it. I like that a lot. Squirt Man Blaster.
Mhm.
Yeah, wow.
Jesus.
Golden age of cinema.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
sounds like a...
Get someone who can do both. Yeah.
I'm Squirt Man Blaster. Pleased to meet you. Stand back.
There's no telling how far this thing's going to go. You know that?
Yeah. I'm like a cicada. You got to check us out on the Patreon to hear about that. We talked about cicadas. We got to talk about Circada,
Yeah.
superhero,
That's
southern superhero.
Just as an addendum to the Patreon Cicada-thon,
We found out that they piss really hard, really far, really fast.
and they suffer from a fungal sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah.
turns them into zombies.
Turns them into
Nut zombies.
but also makes them
nut zombies.
gay.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I didn't see that. That's great.
Yeah, it's science. Look, it's right,
Science.
It's right here on the internet.
That's good.
Yeah, makes them gay. Here, 1 second, just really quick.
Suck up.
A sexually transmitted fungus is making trillions of cicadas hypersexual and gay.
Wow. Is this some Alex Jones shit you got?
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
on, dude.
It's probably just the water.
Yeah, and the frogs.
Yeah.
Frogs are fucking them.
Good
Eating
frogs.
them, turning gay.
Mm-hmm. Those cicadas better wrap it up.
Yeah, check us out over on the Patreon. Now, for instance, I'm going to tell a story today. This is what we're funding with the Patreon, folks. We're trying to build this studio out a little bit bigger so we can have a guest.
Mhm.
You know, and we have a little room to have a guest, to house a guest.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
In a classy way.
A Sibian
Yes.
section.
yes, yes.
So it's $5 a month. It's an extra show per week, and we have a gang of fun over there. We talk about all types of ill shit.
A real potpourri.
Yes.
Yes.
And there's almost 400 subscribers right now, which is hugely
Lovely.
exciting and just the best.
Humbling,
Humbling.
but also at the same time ego boosting.
Yes.
A little bit of both.
Humbling. Yeah. It
Little
jazzes me up, but it also dresses me down.
That's right.
But for instance, it would be nice to have the room here to have a Black American to talk about today's subject, because we are three white boys talking about today's subject, which is a guy I think I've said a few times I've wanted to tackle because I really know about him from references in The Wire and of course at the beginning of Frank Lucas's movie biopic American Gangster.
Mhm.
It shows that he is the driver for Bumpy Johnson, today's subject.
Okay.
And the thing about gangsterdom in that time is, like, it shows you how high stakes things got, and it shows you how much, in that era of the 60s onward, let's say, body count flies up, and everybody's cheating, everybody's snitching on everybody, and
Drugs are getting harder.
drugs are getting
Yeah,
harder, life is getting sadder, and the cops are playing dirtier. They're bringing the RICO stuff. They're kind of cheating.
Yeah.
But you can't be a gangster and say, hey, they're cheating.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
not-
you know what I mean? It's kind of your thing, you know? But it's a sadder time, and then it raises up to this time that we're in now where it's like cartels, and it's like there's just no humor in it.
None.
You
No,
know?
they don't seem like a very funny group.
No, there's not a lot of like wise guys like, eh.
Yeah,
No,
you couldn't do a Goodfellas about the cartel.
No.
Even as serious as that movie is, it's peppered in with lots of humor.
Yeah.
No cartel Goodfellas.
At this era we're going to be talking about here, what I love about it so much is, and you guys know this from a bunch of the profiles I've done, but it's this thing where, like, it's far, killing somebody is such a political decision. You know what I mean? Like, it's thought over.
Yes.
It's not like somebody looked at me wrong and we just killed him, And it's an era where these men live and die gangsters. You know what I mean? A bunch of them don't die in prison or even get shot to death. You know,
Just die of old age.
They got old and died.
Mhm.
You know, so it's kind of it's a cool time to me, and it's always interesting to find out about the black side of organized crime because it is so underreported.
Yes, and under dramatized in movies.
Yeah, and it's catching up now. Like, so for instance, there is Hoodlum is a 97 movie.
Yeah, I've seen it. Lawrence Fishburne.
Lawrence Fishburne.
Running numbers.
The Godfather of Harlem. That was that's a series that's still on. American Gangster, of course. We said, you know, Frank Lucas, but Bumpy's in the beginning. And there's that a reference in The Wire in the 1999 comedy Life. They're working on behalf of Spanky Johnson, played by Rick James.
That's right.
But yeah, so I want to start here at the beginning. Ellsworth Raymond Bumpy Johnson came into this world on Halloween 1905 in Charleston, South Carolina. His mother was Margaret Moultrie. That's why I was getting caught up on the name already. A domestic worker, which is a maid.
Mm-hmm.
And his father was William Johnson, a fisherman. They were a highly religious family with 7 children. Margaret, Priscilla, Pauline, Willie, Mabel, Genevieve, Elise, and Ellsworth, the youngest. They're all sharing a small 3-bedroom home. They lived in the darker section of the colored side of town.
Is that right?
So there would be a light-skinned section and then a dark, like...
If you can pass, it makes it, it really helps.
That is wild.
Yep. That's how important race is to America and other places. And
We love to self-segregate.
yeah.
Even when it's forced upon you,
Yeah.
we'll still find ways.
And so there was claims that he made later in life about his family that were seen, at least even by his wife, to not be true. He would claim his father had been the director of a Negro Federation bank that had since gone defunct. But his mother did work for wealthy families part of the year in New York. She would go up there, and when her 3 oldest daughters were teenagers, they joined her and also became, maids. And but they stayed year round. And Priscilla got engaged to a well-to-do medical student from Brooklyn, but she died after drinking tainted water.
Oh my God.
Her body was shipped back to Charleston for burial. Bumpy recalled on the morning of the burial, everybody was drinking coffee, all the adults, and he asked his mother for a cup, but she told him he was too young, and because he was 3. Just
I need a cup of coffee, Ma.
Yeah.
Can you boil the water first? Yes.
And
So this is 1908.
right,
Yeah, this is before they were doing like mass chlorination of water.
right, and that happened in New York.
Yeah.
So
Frogs were straight.
Back in the good old days,
Yeah.
frogs were straight.
yeah, cicadas too.
Cicadas were chased.
But his sister Margaret said, "Oh, let him have some," and she made him like a cup fixed with like a ton of sugar and milk, and she became his favorite sibling. He went to school in a segregated 2-room schoolhouse. He claimed to skip ahead 2 grades, and later on, he also claimed he said he went to the Avery Institute, also not believed to be true. He lied about having taken classes in New York City as well. The nickname Bumpy came because of a bump on the back of his head. That's it.
Okay.
In 1915, his 19-year-old brother Willie was accused of killing a white man and had to be hustled out of town. His parents had to mortgage their house to pay off the cops
Oh, Christ.
and pay for his travel. And so the whole family had to chip in, to not lose the house. Willie, his older brother, his only older brother, joined the Merchant Marines, and he never sent any money home, which Bumpy never forgave him for.
I wouldn't either.
As a wee boy, he had a short temper. He hated the racism heaped on blacks and talked about it openly. Some of the white girls in Charleston were noticing Bumpy, which made his parents very nervous. If a white man were ever to confront him, he couldn't hold his tongue. In 1919, he's 14 now. He's sent to live with his sister Mabel in Harlem. She was married with 2 kids. He had a plan to find his favorite sister, Margaret,
Who made him the coffee?
And she had a job, an apartment, and took Pratt Institute night classes. But Mabel would not share Margaret's address. He was small for his age,
Mhm.
and he had a thick Southern accent. And bullies just took to him.
Right.
On his first day of high school, he was walking with a roll of pennies for lunch money. And 2 blocks from the school, he noticed a group of teens shooting dice. One of the guys named 6 and 8.
What's the guy's name?
6 and 8. He ran out of money, and another one said, "Hey, I bet old country boy over there got some cash." 6 and 8 asked Bumpy what he has in his pocket. Bumpy says he has his hands in his pocket. Words were exchanged, and the other guys started betting on who was going to win the fight, 6 and 8 or the country boy. Bumpy dodged 6 and 8's fists and rained down punches on his head. 6 and 8 grabbed Bumpy's trousers and wouldn't let them go until Bumpy's fist connected to the side of his head, and pennies went flying. He ended the fight by kicking 6 in the balls.
Oh my God.
The guys stopped Bumpy before he could kick him in the head. They were impressed by his toughness and happy he'd won the money from the bets.
Sure.
But he should cool it. And if he hadn't won the money, they'd have jumped him. Bumpy shouted back, "And I would have kicked all of your asses, and I still will."
And he had a loaded fist because he had the roll of pennies.
Yeah,
in it.
and they kind of liked that he played dirty.
Pretty nice.
So these guys are so like, look at this fucking little animal, and these guys become his lifelong best friends.
Nice.
It's Nat, Junie, Finley, and he even became friends with 6 and 8 later. And years later, they talk about this first, and they'd be
Remember when
cracking
he
up.
Beat your ass.
Yeah, and they just couldn't believe the audacity of this little kid. So he also met this guy named Georgie Rose, Richie Williams, Steve Mitchell, and Obadiah, and that became the crew. He was 5'8", trim frame. He had dark hair, and his hair was always cut neat. He had almond-shaped eyes, and it could bear like a hole in your soul if he looked at you, but he also had a very warm smile. Every morning he hit the streets, evading the truancy officers, shooting dice, hustling pool games, selling newspapers. He was saving up money to send back home. He was also thieving and extorting. Bumpy and the guys offered the owners of new businesses protection at a price. When he was 16, Bumpy became an associate of William "Bub" Hewlett, the preeminent gangster in Harlem at the time. He was one of the few people who didn't back down when Bub raised his voice, and that's how he kind of became a lieutenant.
A lot of respect going around here.
Yeah. And so now they start pulling him and his crew small robbery jobs downtown. One day he finds an envelope that listed his sister Margaret's address in Brooklyn, and he got to the door. He's greeted coldly by a short, dark-skinned woman. She told him there was no one there, named Margaret Johnson. She asked what he wanted, and he said he wanted to connect with his sister. She asked if he was going to school, and he lied, and he said he was. She told him to have a good day and close the door, and he was just confused.
He just found an envelope with her address on it?
Yes.
Like while he was hustling?
No, I would say probably at home, maybe.
Okay.
Because, Mabel's the sister that wouldn't give him the address.
Got it.
When he got home, Mabel confronted him about a letter she had from the Board of Education revealing that he had never attended school. And then she stopped yelling, and he showed her the envelope, and she was like, "Yeah, that is Margaret, if that's who you talk to." And she wanted to yell at Margaret, and Bumpy was like, "No, she doesn't want anything to do with me. Just forget it." But he was devastated by this. She encouraged him to start going to school, but then he showed her $200 in his savings and changed her mind.
Yeah, there you go.
You skipped all the grades.
Yeah.
He said he earned it sweeping.
Uh-huh.
Sweeping money into an envelope.
Yeah, beating people over the head with a broom. And he gave half to her, and he had her send the other half home to his parents.
Good boy.
Harlem was the largest community of black people in New York, and it was a late-night playground for wealthy white people. The nightclubs were all owned by gangsters, like the Cotton Club, which gangster Oni Madden opened in 1923. This is also the height of the Harlem Renaissance, when the art scene was bubbling over with the talents of Langston Hughes, Paul Robeson, and Zora Neale Hurston. Black gangsters like Bub, Bumpy, and his crew were called the Harlem Bad Men, which is a fucking cold-ass name.
Yeah, you would get a lot of, young white people who would, tourist night vacation down into
For sure.
Harlem.
Yes,
stuff
right.
to
But have a
kinda-
great time. And
of course have a great time, but they couldn't be seen by, polite society in these areas and stuff like that.
Yeah,
It's very convenient for them that they also then get to leave and go back
Yes,
to
right.
their
right.
neighborhood.
And, probably a lot more jazz cigarettes floating around, you know what I mean? Very nice. Bumpy's crew was also offering protection services to the club and speakeasy owners. And it was Bub that suggested that he start offering protection to the bankers for the numbers rackets.
Smart.
So the numbers rackets, you know how that works?
It's basically a guerrilla lottery.
Yeah. And so what they do is it's a 3-digit number, and you pick one, and you give it to the guy, and you give him your money. And if your number comes in, everybody knows it because what it is it's the total of bets from the previous day's racing.
It's in the newspaper.
It's in every newspaper.
Oh, okay.
And it's completely just by chance. So you know there's no bullshit with it. The bankers made more than nightclub owners at thousands per week, untaxed. And they would set up shop at some private local establishment like a social club, veterans hall, speakeasy, or a barber shop and take bets from gamblers. The runners would take the money and the betting slips to the bookies back to the headquarters known as the Numbers Bank. Bankers only wanted to hire the toughest, most intimidating bodyguards to protect their businesses. And he was not a big man, but before long, Bumpy had earned reputation as one of Harlem's most sought-after bodyguards. One night, February 1924, Bumpy and Nat, his buddy that jumped him, were escorting a Cuban numbers banker named Alex Pompez.
Mm-hmm.
Out of nowhere, a guy steps out of an alley brandishing a pistol, like Gotham style. You know what I mean? And demanding Pompez's wallet. In just a fluid motion, Bumpy just pulls out a switchblade, clicks it, cuts him straight across the face, and
that's how you got Scarface.
Yes, bro.
He drops his weapon. Ah, my fucking face! Bumpy pushes Pompez into a car, and then he slashes the guy's face again, and then cuts him across the abdomen.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Fucking cop comes over, and Bumpy's already dumped the knife in the gutter, and he tells the cop, he's like, Pompez isn't speaking English. I got him. And
you're looking for Knifey Johnson.
and he tries to go up to Pompez again, the cop, and Bumpy gets in his way, and then this time the cop is like, get the fuck, and he pushes Pompez and Nat into the car, and they take off, and Bumpy starts fighting with this cop after he punches him in the face.
Oh, my God.
And then he starts wrestling with him, stopping him from pulling his weapon out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. It would take 3 officers to subdue him. 19-year-old Bumpy was charged with attempted murder, assaulting an officer, and resisting arrest. Thanks to a lawyer provided by Pompez, the charges were reduced to disorderly conduct.
Oh, my God.
And he got 1 year probation.
He was just being all weird out there.
Later in life, Pompez became the international scouting director for the New York San Francisco Giants baseball team.
That checks out.
He made it into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 2006.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Thanks to Bumpy.
Cuba!
The slashing incident made the papers, which mortified Mabel, but she still took his money. A banker named Madame Stephanie St. Clair heard about Bumpy. Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the most fuckable name I've ever heard in my life. Oof, my God. Madame Stephanie St. Clair?
I think I saw a couple movies of hers in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she heard about Bumpy and wanted him on her payroll. She had him watching one of her many spots around Harlem. When she saw him reading a book about black U.S. military units, she was impressed by his intelligence and decided to make him a personal bodyguard. He escorted her to plays, concerts, nightclubs, and discussed the classics. But in 1925, Bumpy got busted on a burglary charge, and a judge sentenced him to 10 years in Elmira prison, a.k.a. The Hill, in central New York. After 2 years, he was released on parole. In 27, he was 22 years old and sentenced to another 2 years in Elmira on an assault charge. Served his time, got back to business in Harlem. He was a free man for just about 5 months before picking up a grand larceny charge in 29. The judge sentenced Bumpy to 2.5 years in Sing Sing.
Ooh.
Sing Sing was home to some very high-profile inmates like the Rosenbergs, the Communist Spies, and while at Sing Sing, Bumpy got to know an Italian guy doing time on an assault charge named Harold Giuliani, the father of future New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Good guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in the Italian-American Hall of Fame.
When Bumpy got out of prison in 1931, he was 26 years old and setting the stage for a legendary career in Harlem. Madame Stephanie St. Clair had been running her banking operation for a decade. She came to Harlem from a small Caribbean island in 1912. She'd maintained that her roots were in France. She spoke flawless European French. Her enemies called her the Tiger from Marseille, but this time a family might be bringing in $10 to $15 a week. If they wagered $1 in the numbers and their 3 digits hit, they could get up to $600.
I think we might have talked about this on another episode before.
Yeah.
About what a kind of a not a good bet, but
Right.
Yeah.
a reasonable play.
There's a
numbers was for a lot of
For sure.
There's a reason the state took it over.
So a penny could get you $6, and you're making that's what a week's pay.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The Harlem Numbers racket generated $50 million in 1931 alone.
Jesus Christ.
That's
In that money, that year's money?
Yeah, but they also had to pay off the magistrates, the police, judges.
Constables.
yes.
Magistrates.
The madams.
Get the fuck out of here with a magistrate. Who even knows what that is? Comptroller.
They called this ice, and it could cost tens of thousands of dollars every year. The most successful Harlem bankers had as many as 100 runners and pulled in around $1 million a year. Madam Stephanie only took in about $100,000, but she was the largest female banker in Harlem. She owned brownstone buildings, luxury cars, and a wardrobe of fine silk gowns and turbans.
Ooh.
Many men had threatened her in the past, but this new figure, this Jewish gangster from the Bronx, who went by the nickname Dutch Schultz.
Oh, you ever heard of him?
Arthur Simon Flegenheimer.
Dutch Schultz is better.
Yeah. He was something else. Dutch wanted Harlem's numbers racket totally under his control. And she said, "The goddamn Dutchman can kiss my ass. He thinks I'm some stupid black guy. I show him he thinks wrong." Back in September 1928, numbers banker Casper Holstein, one of only 6 black millionaires in Harlem, was chauffeured in his limousine to the home of a married woman on 145th Street and 7th Avenue. When he stepped out of the limo, Holstein was grabbed by 4 white men who dragged him into a car claiming to be cops. They beat him with blackjacks and bound and gagged him. His chauffeur reported the kidnapping to the police. The kidnappers demanded a $50K ransom, which they received the following day. They released Holstein shortly after midnight. One of the kidnappers was Schultz's man, Vincent Mad Dog Cole. This operation proved to Schultz that if Harlem's numbers game was no penny racket, if they could slap down $50K on a Sunday when the financial institutions were closed, there was plenty more cash where that came from. Dutch's men started paying visits to the Harlem bankers, letting them know that their boss wanted to join their operation. He could protect their operators from both the cops and from gangland kidnappings that were springing up.
Oh.
The numbers bankers rejected the offers. They already had their own protection, but doubled up on bodyguards. Even though the Harlem bankers were still paying for police protection, Dutch manipulated officers into arresting some of the bankers' men. Madam Stephanie starts writing to the Harlem newspapers and police commissioner, and even to the mayor to complain about those arrests. She ended up getting arrested for racketeering in December 29 and got a year's sentence.
No good deed.
But after a month in prison, she agreed to testify in a city judge's investigation. She gave up the names of police officers and magistrates who were on the take, but still made arrests and levied jail sentences against folks in the numbers racket. Some bankers fled New York, but others had their operations slowly absorbed by Dutch Schultz and his gang. By late 31, Dutch was the dominant player in Harlem's number game, and he continued expanding his operation, which he called his combination. Bub Hewlett, now working for Schultz, visited Madam and encouraged her in so many words to join the combination. But Madam was well aware of how the big-time bankers that once netted tens of thousands of dollars in revenue were now restricted to $100 to $200 weekly salaries. Enraged, Madam hissed at Hewlett that she would never surrender to her bank to the goddamn Dutchman. She thinks he's Dutch. Maybe he is.
Well, as you know, that's the French for you.
It was ludicrous that he, a black man, would approach her with such an outrageous offer on behalf of a white man. Dutch could kiss her ass, and Bub could help him do it. Bub left with a snarl and a sarcastic remark about the next callers perhaps not acting as gentlemanly as he had. Then it seemed like all of Madam's pickup spots were the targets of drive-by shootings. Her men were threatened and beaten to a pulp. Officers she regularly paid ice to were now arresting her employees. Once a banker's business was interrupted by arrests, the payouts from the day couldn't be completed, and customers would start placing their bets elsewhere.
Yeah.
Despite these setbacks, a lot of Madam's people stayed loyal to her. She always paid regularly and motivated them with the challenge that they were standing up to the Dutchman. People thought Madam was crazy. She had sought help from the newspapers, the police, and the courts in her fight against Schultz. How could one?
That is pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How could one woman alone possibly stand up to all these powerful men? But Madam had a secret weapon. Her main enforcer was getting out of jail on October 31.
Just you wait, I got the real motherfucker coming.
This guy has no kind of dignity. He was getting out of jail October 31 after 2.5 years in Sing Sing.
His birthday.
He was just as mad about a white man taking thousands of dollars a week out of Harlem as she was.
And he's been stewing.
She had placed her bet that Bumpy Johnson was going to be a very big problem for the Dutchman. When Bumpy got out of Sing Sing, Bub approached him with an offer to join Dutch's combination at $200 a week salary. He said he'd think it over.
He produced a roll of quarters from his asshole.
I've been all waiting.
When Bumpy meets with the madam, she says she wants Bumpy to kill Dutch or she's going to kill him herself. Bumpy tells her attempting a hit on Dutch would bring all-out war, and is she ready for that? She'd have to hire at least 10 good bodyguards at $200 a week. She'd also have to buy weapons, pay off more cops, and put up bail money. It could take not just weeks or months, but years to settle. But she promised Bumpy the Harlem bankers and all their workers would chip in, buy their guns, buy their cops, and kill the Dutchman. Harlem's restaurant and nightclub owners would also contribute to the cause. Another contributor was Dickie Wells, a New York celebrity through the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Dickie was called Mr. New York and Mr. Harlem. He rose to fame as a professional dancer, but earned his most acclaim and fortune as a male gigolo.
Oh,
Nice.
pretty good. That's Mr. New York for you.
Dude,
Yeah.
what a fucking stud.
Yeah.
This guy.
They're like, don't worry, he's going to pitch in too. You know the guy with the dick?
My name's Bumpy Johnson.
Yeah.
But this guy's the dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's going to dance all over this.
He romanced the likes of actresses Tallulah Bankhead, Ava Gardner, and Joan Crawford,
All at the same time.
as well as the daughters of business tycoons and diplomats. He's said to have never taken a dime from a black woman, but siphoned every dollar he could from the rich white ones. He'd already been earning hundreds of dollars a week as a dancer when he gave up that lifestyle to be a gigolo. They paid him in cash, jewels, clothes, and cars. Willie bought his mother a brownstone in Harlem's ritziest neighborhood and occupied the basement apartment until his death.
Wow.
Even though he didn't have anything to do with the numbers racket, he was a close personal friend of Madame Stephanie's, and he enjoyed her company in a platonic fashion.
Aw.
In a very platonic fashion.
He donated $1,000 in 1932,
Shit.
and that went a long way. They had their financing, now they needed soldiers. Naturally, Bumpy turned to his crew, Finley, Junie, and Nat.
6 and 8.
Yes! Obadiah, Richie Williams, Hoss Steele, George Rose, and Steve Mitchell.
Steve Mitchell.
Yeah, it's like the Steve Miller Band all over again. Oh, great. Steve Mitchell, too.
We're gonna dance with the light on.
Fly. Let's see. They had their financing. Now they. Oh, say the soldiers. I said that. Sorry. Finley was in charge of getting the guns. Junie was the brains, great at thinking up a plan on the spot. Nat and Steve were stone cold killers, completely without fear, willing to take a man out with fists, a knife, or a gun. Georgie Rose was a con man and ladies' man who picked up a lot of insider knowledge from betting the girlfriends of Dutch Schultz's men.
Nice. Smart.
Everybody's
I'm
fucking.
something of an amateur gigolo
I'm
myself.
kind of an inside guy.
Soon there were drive-by shootings at Madame Stephanie's spots and the other Harlem bankers who'd refused Dutch, but in retaliation, Dutch's spots in Harlem were getting shot up too. The two sides were locked in a guerrilla war, but Bumpy's men had the advantage of being able to blend in easily in Harlem. Dutch's white soldiers from the Bronx stood out like sore
Yeah, no
thumbs.
shit.
And you know, in the daytime, especially, easy pickings for a shooting. But Bub Hewlett and his men, all black, were also working for Dutch and gunning for Bumpy. It could have been a showdown for the ages, but in December 32, 46-year-old Bub Hewlett got arrested in connection to a switchblade attack he'd committed for one of his other employers. He got 2.5 years prison, taking him out of play. Schultz hired another black enforcer in 1934, Ulysses Rollins from Chicago.
Great name.
A lot of good names in this
Yeah.
one.
Dutch rarely set foot in Harlem and was always flanked by at least 3 bodyguards. Bumpy was frustrated that he could never catch a clear shot at Dutch, but in 34, Bumpy reached out to Lucky Luciano. Luciano, of course, famous New York gangster with one of the 5 families. I believe he was Genevieve's family. Luciano said he couldn't get involved, but hypothetically, if we were to get involved,
Just say.
he would want to take over the Harlem numbers racket for himself and keep Bumpy on the payroll for $1,000 a week. Bumpy expressed his disappointment, but made it clear that hypothetically, if Luciano got involved and moved against the Harlem bankers, he would have to take out Luciano himself. So he's like, yeah, if you do that, I'm going to have to do that. Hypothetically.
If we're talking in hypotheticals.
Let's just
Say, let's play this out.
Yeah. Let's say man on the moon scenario.
Yeah. He's saying, get me off the moon.
And Luciano laughs. And
I like this kid.
Yeah, that's, everybody seems to have that
and
feeling.
he told him such an action would result in war with the Italians, which Bumpy certainly wouldn't survive. But Bumpy reminded Luciano that Dutch said he wouldn't survive a war with him, and here he was still standing 3 years later.
What do you think about that?
And even though Luciano was impressed by the balls on Bumpy, they shook hands and parted ways, and he would stay out of the Harlem War for now. Bumpy and Ulysses finally had a face-to-face confrontation in the summer of 35.
Bumpy and
Ulysses is the new enforcer for
Ulysses,
Dutch.
got it.
Yeah. Bumpy was out at the Alhambra Bar and Theater on a date with one of his lovers, Helen Lawrenson, who was
sounds white.
it was the editor of Vanity Fair, a white woman.
Oh my Lord. God in heaven.
Yeah. He spotted Rollins and without hesitation drew out his knife and jumped on the man. The two struggled on the floor for a while before Bumpy stood up and straightened his tie. Rollins' face and abdomen were badly slashed and one of his eyes was hanging out of the socket, dangling by the ligaments.
Oh.
Bumpy calmly stepped over Ulysses Rollins, picked up a menu, and said he suddenly had a taste for spaghetti and meatball.
No, God, that's fucking gross.
I mean, traditionally those are brains. I mean, usually the grapes, the Halloween.
Pretty baller move.
Yeah. And meanwhile, Helen Lawrenson is over here like,
Throwing up.
yeah, barfing.
And ordering martinis.
Yeah. Against all expectations, Rollins survived his injuries and got out of the hospital that very same night.
No.
He went looking for Bumpy and found him at a restaurant on 125th Street.
He's still eating.
With one eye?
With a big plate of spaghetti and meatballs.
I don't know, boss. I just love eating spaghetti and meatballs.
Rollins took out a gun and fired a shot that went through Bumpy's hat, hitting an innocent bystander and killing her on the spot.
Jesus.
Oh my God. That's the same thing that happened in the fucking Iceberg Slim one.
Yeah.
Like, the guy fucking took a gun out, shot him in a bar, and it went through his hat.
I mean, really making a case for
You gotta wear hats.
Yeah, but like not baseball hats.
No, tall ones.
Tall
It didn't work for Lincoln.
No. Well, he wasn't
But-
wearing a hat in the theme.
He's
You
exception
always,
that proves the rule.
you always imagine that it shoots straight up when that bullet goes through it. Whoop! Yeah. An off-duty officer was at the restaurant and apprehended Rollins, who was found guilty of the killing and sent to prison. Bumpy never wore a hat again. I don't know why.
Seems like a lucky hat.
Yeah, I guess, you can't count on it twice. Can't
Yeah,
count on a
yeah.
miracle twice.
Yeah. Never wore a hat again. This is one thing I know.
He's blaming the hat for the shooting. It's like, no, you pulled a guy's eye out. Fucking idiot.
That said, fuck Ulysses or something.
In October of 35, Madame Stephanie and Bumpy's prayers were answered. Lucky Luciano set up a hit on Dutch Schultz. Dutch and 3 of his bodyguards were gunned down in a restaurant in Newark. The hit wasn't a favor to Bumpy or anybody in Harlem. Dutch had gotten on Luciano's bad side after he had made it known that he was going to put a hit on Special Prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey, who's later the mayor or the governor.
I think he was a governor. He would lose to Truman.
Yeah, he ran for president.
Yes. The entire Italian mob was against the hit. It would bring down way too much heat on everybody, and Dutch wouldn't listen to reason, so Luciano had to take him out of play. A week after his death, Luciano arranged a meeting with Bumpy. Bumpy told him plainly that if he wanted to take over the bankruptcy who'd gone to Dutch and offered him no support, he wouldn't lose sleep over a bunch of cowards. So that's, the guys like that were with, he's saying, if you want to keep those, fine. I'm just going to keep what I have,
Okay.
He wasn't going to lose sleep over a bunch of cowards. Lucci agreed not to move on bankers who'd sided with Bumpy, but any new banks that opened up would be under Italian control. What's more, Bumpy wanted to be the Italian mafia's man in Harlem. Luciano's Harlem partner.
He said that.
Yes.
Smart.
The mob would not attempt to make any moves in Harlem without letting Bumpy know first, and allow him to get a taste of the action if he wanted. So that means, like, if there's going to be a hit and money involved,
We'll
it's
let you
going
know.
it's going to Bumpy.
What's so funny is that Harlem is a Dutch word,
Yeah.
and they fucked that guy up.
Maybe he thought he could take it over because he changed his name.
Fuck him.
They haggled for hours over the points, but Bumpy was guaranteed, and they ultimately shook on the deal. Bumpy had Luciano's word, and by extension, the word of all the families. Bumpy had negotiated for peace with honor, putting an end to the war without losing any additional lives. All in all, more than 40 people had been killed in connection with the Bumpy-Dutch war in Harlem, and several were kidnapped. Which seems so low now.
Yeah, it seems.
You're like, oh,
yeah.
it went on for years, and only a couple people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, but
More kids died at a school last week, probably somewhere.
But every time, back then, every time it happened, it was
Tons of heat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tons of heat, yes.
Yeah. It's important to keep the body counts low and organized.
But
but very precise.
Yeah. But so, it's this thing where now, like, also so much money is still coming in. right? That you go like, why do I need to really push it? And now, you know, he doesn't have to spend all that money on this war.
Right.
You're not worried about your places getting shot up. They can continue giving you numbers during the day. So he's reached peace. But more importantly than that, he has shown Harlem a black man can stand up to white organized crime and not back down and that's that.
Yeah, and have a seat at the table.
Yeah. It was a monumental change in the order of things, and he was a legend from there on out. Him and his crew were made men in Harlem. He never drank alcohol, but he never paid for his ginger ales. Everywhere he went, people wanted to be around him, even politicians, members of law enforcement, celebrities from entertainment and sports. He was also irresistible to women who were drawn to his power as much as his personality. The fame was intoxicating, but what Bumpy loved more was the power. When the Italians tried to muscle in on a bank that was supposed to be off limits, the banker reached out to Bumpy, who ordered an immediate work slowdown. Half of the runners in Harlem who worked for the Italians called in sick the next day.
No shit.
The ones who showed up to work only pulled in 1/10 of their usual take.
Sorry, boss.
After 2 days of this, Bumpy was called in for a meeting with Luciano at his Waldorf Astoria suite. Luciano said this banker owed the mob money, and they were hoping to make good on his debt by taking over his bank. After a half hour of negotiations, Luciano agreed that he would lay off the banker, but Bumpy would ensure that he paid back the loan at an even steeper interest rate. On his way out of the meeting, Bumpy noticed a chess set. The men were mutually impressed that the other could play and sat down for a few games.
No shit.
And from then on, every time they met, they would meet for a weekly chess match.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like Professor X and Magneto.
Yeah.
I do love that a lot.
Yeah, and
do you think Bumpy was always black?
Yeah, I hope so.
I bet it sounds like something you could joke about every time you set up.
Yeah.
Why does the white piece get to go first?
And Bumpy's favorite park that was in front of the YMCA on 135th Street, and Lucky Luciano even came there to play him sometimes.
It's fun to stay at the YMCA.
Yeah. A couple of guys fooling around at the YMCA. It's a big deal.
Got a Native American guy.
Construction
got
worker.
Moving pieces around.
Yeah. There's a leather guy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey.
Oh, shit, here comes the bishop.
Always moving diagonally.
Oh, my God.
Here comes the bishop.
You know what that is. That's
A penis.
It's a penis.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's a penis, pal.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Special Prosecutor Thomas Dewey nabbed Luciano a compulsory prostitution charge in July 1936, and he got a 30-year sentence and was sent to Dannemora prison.
They made that movie about it.
Bumpy would never consider himself a pimp because he never went out and recruited sex workers. But if somebody wanted his protection, he would look out for them for a cut of their nightly take. He later told his wife that if a girl held out on him, he would go to her place and instead of beating her, cut up her clothes.
Well,
It's also kind of smart.
yeah.
Now you gotta fuck.
Yeah, what are you gonna wear out there? You know what I mean? You can't go out there, you know.
And also probably not going to the hospital,
Yeah.
not going to the cops.
You're not wasting any good wire hangers on the beatings.
And he said she could make more money without bruises in the romance department.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dude, that is like so common sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you going to take your moneymaker and maim them?
Yeah. This is a man who plays chess, you know. He's thinking. He's thinking.
ahead.
Yeah.
Smart guy. Good guys.
Maybe.
Bumpy had several things going on with women, both black and white.
Hey, cool.
Bumpy's
God, it's really quick, man.
It's really nice. Bumpy's sisters in Harlem were also trying to soak up his limelight. They could drop his name at any restaurant or nightclub and never see the check. For all the favors that...
Even the one that wanted nothing to do with him?
I haven't heard that.
I hope not.
For all the favors that being Bumpy's sisters afforded them, sometimes Bumpy needed help in return. One day in 1935, he showed up at his sister Genevieve's house with a baby girl, saying that she was his daughter and Ginny needed to take care of her.
Oh, my God.
She looked at the child stunned and said, "Your daughter? Bumpy, this is a white baby." And he said, "How are you going to say it's a white baby when I just told you I'm the father?" Ginny asked about the mother, and he told her not to worry about it. The mother couldn't take care of her, and her name and told her name was Elise. He's got a sister named Elise, of course. He said the baby was an angel and hardly cried at all. He couldn't send her to his sister Elise in Charleston. He wanted the child close by. When Bumpy offered Ginny a $25 a week salary to cover all the baby's expenses, she gladly took Elise in. Bumpy would never tell anyone who Lisa's mother was. Even when she grew up, he wouldn't tell her. Eventually, she got a copy of her birth certificate and saw that she was born in New Jersey to Helen Morgan. She asked Bumpy how she could find Helen, but he said it was a made-up name she gave to the hospital. Bumpy's family never agreed with his choice to not tell Elise who her mother was. He was keeping a promise he made to the mother to never reveal her identity.
And was he the father?
He was, in exchange for her not getting an abortion like she originally wanted.
Wow.
So he just never, that was the agreement, and he stuck to it.
Oh.
Madam Stephanie was more than a little hurt when Bumpy decided to open his own bank instead of returning to work for her, but it was obvious he'd make more money striking out on his own. Madam Stephanie ended up marrying a flamboyant community organizer named Sufi Abdul Hamid in 1936.
Ooh.
The next year, she found out he was having an affair and shot him twice with a .38, but he survived. Still, she served 10 years in prison for attempted murder.
Oh, my God.
After her release, she moved to a mansion in Long Island and never returned to the numbers business.
No.
Got out. That was that.
These fucking Arab sons of bitches. Right?
Long Island.
Yeah. She's got a thick Long Island accent.
Yeah. Yeah.
How you doing, hon?
How you doing, hon? I'm just a normal Long Island chick.
Bridge and tunnel crowd now. In 1937, there was a pimp named New York Charlie who used the gorilla, as in the animal tactic, where you pick out a girl and beat her up until she agrees to make you her pimp.
Jesus Christ.
That was the tag that was in Iceberg Slim's book too.
He pulled that move on one of the girls that Bumpy was protecting. Bumpy went looking for Charlie, and then when he found, he sliced him up pretty bad. Bumpy assumed that would be the end of things, but he was wrong. After cutting up Charlie, Bumpy went out to dinner with friends. A police officer interrupted his meal to say he was under arrest.
Excuse me.
From his hospital bed, Charlie had identified Bumpy as his attacker.
He's hatless.
Got a big old bump in his head.
Bumpy said this was a misunderstanding and offered to go down to the hospital and clear things up.
Oh.
Okay.
Charlie was being prepped for surgery when they brought in Bumpy in his room, and he said, "Yeah, that's the motherfucker who cut me up."
Go sleep. Go sleep.
Bumpy jumped on the hospital gurney and started choking him. Oh my God. He wouldn't let go of Charlie's throat until the police had beaten him unconscious with their nightsticks.
Jesus Christ.
And I'll do it again.
I'm an innocent man.
What'd you say? I'll kill you.
God is my witness. Bumpy got sentenced to 10 years for felonious assault and head off to Dannemora. He was 32 years old.
Damn.
Yeah, that's a bad move.
That was more of a checkers move.
Yeah. He jumped him.
Less chess, more checkers.
Yeah.
Fucking so.
It's a big misunderstanding. Let's go to the hospital and just straighten this out.
just
You
throw it.
fucking motherfucker!
Yeah.
I guess if he dies, he can't implicate
I mean,
right?
the thing that I guess occurs to me is, does New York Charlie know what Bumpy Johnson looks like?
He was famous at this point.
Yeah.
I suppose, yeah.
And he did.
That's the only reason I could see why you would snitch on him and step to one of his women. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I would imagine
Well,
you
maybe
can't-
he didn't know that she was under his protection.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Until it was too late.
Yeah, and then he's in the hospital. He's like, well, catch that motherfucker. And then he wins that round, I guess.
Bumpy got out of prison in 1947.
What year did he go in?
Let's see.
He was sentenced to 10 years. Did he do
Yeah.
10?
I don't know if he did the 10.
Probably not.
Oh, shit.
He played a guard for his freedom with chess.
Yeah.
Checkmate, motherfucker.
This was 37. Yeah, so he did the 10.
Holy shit.
Wow.
His old friend Dickie surprised Bumpy with a welcome home party at Harris's Bar on 132nd Street and 7th with 200 guests in attendance.
10 fucking years.
A lot of the bankers noticed that Bumpy had put on a few pounds.
Yeah.
He let them know that he helped Luciano with a situation inside, which resulted in him getting an invitation to all the Italian guys' dinners.
And if you know anything from Goodfellas, they fucking get the good shit.
They had all their food shipped in and were cooking it themselves. With every conversation at the party, the guests would be slipping Bumpy an envelope of cash to help him get back on his feet. Just one envelope from the banker Johnny Walker on Sugar Hill contained $20,000.
Holy shit.
That would be over $250,000 today. A few days later, Bumpy met up with Joey Adonis, the manager of Lucky Luciano's operations. He received an envelope with $6,000 and the keys to a 1947 Lincoln Continental.
What?
Nice.
Man, you guys don't do shit for me when I get out of jail.
Yeah.
Try it out.
Yeah. Just want to know who you fucked in there.
Yeah.
Tell us. Bumpy
Did you
let
get tits like that serial killer guy?
Bumpy let Joey know that he was going to be setting up business on 135th Street, and Joey said that would have to go through some channels. In a meeting with mob associates, Bumpy made it clear that he would work under the same deal he had with Luciano. He would operate his own banks with no interference, not kicking any money up to the Italians. He told Joey A to let Luciano know what was going on in Harlem and that he was not happy about it. Bumpy then met with his own men to let him know that a war may be coming down the pipeline. He said the first order of business would be snatching up a couple of their guys, asking for $100,000 in ransom, and then turning them loose. Let it be known that they were serious. It never came to that because Joey Adonis did actually get word to Lucky Luciano all the way over in Naples, Italy.
Holy shit.
Luciano told Adonis that in no uncertain terms the mob was to honor the deal he had struck with Bumpy and give him anything he wanted.
Wow.
Luciano told Joey Adonis that they were in the joint together. Bumpy had slugged a guy who was trying to shank Luciano in the yard, saving his life.
Holy shit.
That'll do it. Good move.
Back to chess.
Yeah. But years later, it turns out that Bumpy paid that guy to.
Yeah, make him look good.
When Joey Adonis gave Bumpy the keys to a new 48 Cadillac, he asked why he never told him what he had done for their friend. Bumpy said, "It wasn't for me to tell." Bumpy's relationship with the mob was good in the 30s and cordial in the 40s. Bumpy opened his numbers bank in February 48 on 135th Street. He met a young woman named Mamie Hatcher that April. Life as Bumpy's girlfriend was a whirlwind. Neither drank, but they stayed out to the wee hours of the morning at the city's best theaters, nightclubs, and gambling dens. She met celebrities like Bill Bojangles Robinson, who had multiple roles in musicals with Shirley Temple.
That's a dancer.
Contrary to his public image, Bill was a mean, drunken gambler who'd even pull out a pistol when he thought he'd been cheated.
I mean, there was a famous song of him dancing in jail.
Yeah. She also met the boxer Sugar Ray Robinson and his wife Edna May. She'd been a dancer at the Cotton Club and was the first model on the cover of Jet magazine.
Whoa.
Bumpy and Mamie Hatcher were married in a civil ceremony in October 48. The bride was 32 and the groom was 43. They'd known each other for 6 months. Mamie had her daughter Ruthie and Bumpy had his daughter Elise, finally all together under the same roof. Their daughters were both 15 years old.
Oh, nice.
Ginny warned Bumpy that Elise was already sneaking out to meet grown men running the streets, so she'd need some strict supervision.
And she's white-ish.
In December 48, Bumpy met Zachary Flash Walker through William Pop Gates, a star player for the Harlem Rennies, the best black basketball team going at that time.
Which means the best basketball team.
Yeah.
Wait till the Generals sign the right people.
He would later coach the Harlem Globetrotters.
What?
Who are the best team in the galaxy.
Wait,
Yeah.
Bumpy?
Oh, no,
this other guy
This guy.
would go on
Yeah.
to coach the Harlem Globetrotters?
Yeah, William Pop Gates.
Dude, that's awesome.
Or Zachary Flash Walker, excuse me.
Flash
Yeah.
Walker. That makes-
Flash Walker.
Yeah. He was always teaching him to spin the ball.
Yeah,
And,
that's why they're so flashy.
yeah.
When Pop was 15, he tried to get a job from Bumpy in the numbers game, but when Bumpy found out that Pop was a high school basketball star, he refused to hire him. Instead, he just gave him money whenever he was in need. In 1948, Pop told Bumpy that he was managing a young boxer who had the gift of gab, but with his glass jaw,
No.
he needed to get into another line of work. He was wondering if Bumpy could provide the young boxer, Flash Walker, with a job. Flash only made $1 a week for his cleaning up a pool room, and they let him sleep on the pool table. He barely had a dime to buy food. Feeling bad for the lad, Bumpy agreed to hire Flash to help out around his house. He was 19 or 20 years old and happy to be hauling trash, scrubbing windows, running errands. After a week or so, Bumpy let Flash work as a numbers runner at one of his spots, and he was a natural. He excelled at convincing bettors to put more money on a spot than they'd originally planned. While most runners brought in $100 to $200 a day, Flash had $500 placed in bets. While he was no longer working at Bumpy's home, he was still a regular dinner guest. One day, Flash got extremely sick. It looked like he might have TB. There was no vaccine at the time, and it was running rampant in New York. When Flash found out he actually had pneumonia, he checked himself out of the hospital and went to Bumpy. He explained that he'd grown up as an orphan being shuffled between foster homes. No one had ever cared for him as much as Bumpy. He swore that he wasn't going to squander his job, but just because of some cold. With that, Bumpy moved Flash into the third bedroom in the apartment. His wife Mamie nursed him back to health, and after a few weeks, Bumpy took him out and bought him a new wardrobe. Flash ended up living...
I want to take you shopping.
Take me shopping. Flash ended up living with them for the next 6 months. He started smoking Pall Malls just like Bumpy, and he would even take his potential girlfriends to meet Bumpy to get Bumpy's approval.
What do you think, huh?
Hey, Mr. Oh, get out of here, lady.
Oh, he doesn't like him.
He went along on the little business trips Bumpy had to take when somebody got out of line. His boxing skills came into good use. He proved to be very good with his hands. Soon he was taking Flash along to his meetings with the Italians. Flash was also fiercely loyal to Bumpy, and he would lay a beating on anyone he thought was disrespecting his surrogate father. Frank Lucas, who was played by Denzel Washington in the movie American Gangster, pretty much co-opted Flash's life story as his own.
No way.
Yeah. Frank would say that he met Bumpy in 1948. He was a pool shark, just like Flash, and Bumpy had bought him clothes and let him live in his apartment. He claimed he had been Bumpy's bodyguard and enforcer who got along to meetings with the Italians. Flash and Bumpy ended up staying tight for 2 years. Flash was even able to introduce himself as Bumpy's son. Bumpy's bank was bringing in about $60,000 a month back then. 1941 was full of loss for Bumpy. His friend Dickie Wells died of
49?
49, yeah. His friend Dickie Wells died of a heart attack, and Bill Bojangles Robinson and Bub Hewlett also passed away. Bumpy wouldn't lay a finger on any of the guys in his crew, even when they pushed his buttons. During a dinner at a Red Rooster's restaurant, one of the guys, Chappie, was kidding Bumpy about something and wouldn't let up. Bumpy stood up calmly, walked into the kitchen, and came out holding a fire axe. He strode through the dining room, out to the streets, and brought the axe down on the hood of Chappie's 49 Cadillac. He just wouldn't fuck up his guys.
But their cars?
There's stuff.
We're hitting 1950s. So let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Be right back, folks. And we're back. Now it's October of 1950, and all hell breaks loose. Flash had done some stints at Rikers Island Jail. During one of those times, he got acquainted with a pimp.
Huh.
One afternoon, they ran into each other on 7th Avenue and started catching up. This pimp explains that he's got a great scheme going on. He'd been involved with a white...
You get women to have sex
Yeah.
for money.
Ah.
And then you take that money and then beat them.
Or cut their clothes.
Or cut their clothes.
He had been involved with a white socialite, the daughter of a big-time politician, and she'd been giving him cash. When her family found out, they made her end the relationship, but not before this pimp had lifted her checkbook. This pimp told Flash that the women were so loaded and careless with money they would never know the checks were missing. He just needed a way to cash these checks without going to the bank and drawing attention. Flash told his friend that all he'd have to do was make the checks out to cash, and then he'd take the money from one of Bumpy's spots that he'd managed, and Flash would deposit the checks into Bumpy's bank account.
Smart.
It didn't take long for Flash and the pimp to get greedy and start depositing $700 and $800 checks.
Not smart.
Checkers shit.
That's, yep. Tiddlywinks.
After 4 months of running this scheme, the bank called in Bumpy to discuss his account. He was face-to-face with the checkbook owner's father, who accused Bumpy of stealing from his daughter and said he'd call the police. Bumpy was able to calm the man down and remind him that going to the police would result in the story getting printed in the paper, something that would be bad for both of them. The politician relented when he received Bumpy's word that there would be no more checks cashed. Bumpy stopped home before he went out looking for Flash. He was irate. But Mamie figured that maybe he'd curse Flash out, suspend him for a few weeks, or dock his pay. But when Mamie's daughter, Ruthie, heard what was going on with Flash, she told Bumpy that earlier that day, Flash had patted her on the butt.
Oh, no.
Elise chimed in saying that Flash had also patted her on the butt.
Oh,
saying
Flash.
he couldn't wait to get her alone, and it wasn't the first time it had happened.
Oh, dude.
Their stories sounded suspicious, but both girls stuck to it. Bumpy took a cab straight over to the Teresa Hotel and confronted Flash outside. He was pummeling Flash on the sidewalk, threatening to kill him. Flash never raised a hand against Bumpy the whole time. Bumpy concluded Flash's beating with a final kick to the head, saying, "Stay away from me and my family, or else I'm going to fucking kill you next time."
Well,
Some months later, after the whole Flash affair, Elise got pregnant, and Bumpy forced her into a shotgun wedding, probably to the wrong man.
Oh,
She gave birth to a baby girl named Margaret. This was also the era when the Italians were bringing heroin into New York and making a fortune off of black people in Harlem. Bumpy is said to have never sold heroin directly, but he sure profited off of it. All of the dealers had to pay Bumpy a percentage of their profits to operate in Harlem, and he loaned them money out at a 25% interest.
never sold it directly.
Yeah.
Just allowed it to be sold.
Flash was still trying to reconcile with Bumpy. He had tried calling the house nonstop and getting Bumpy's friends to intercede on his behalf. They'd remind Bumpy how much Flash knew about his business and that it would be better to make up with him than have him as an enemy. Bumpy refused. One day, a former girlfriend of Flash's named Lovey stopped by Bumpy's apartment for a visit, saying she had a message from Flash. She talked to Bumpy's wife, but asked when Bumpy would be home. When Bumpy arrived, she broke down crying and explained that Flash had set her up.
Oh, no.
He had given her a package of heroin and told her to hide it in Bumpy's sofa. Then call him, tell him where the package was stashed so he could call the cops and report on Bumpy. Bumpy gave Lovey a few $100s for her honesty and told her to get out of town before Flash found her. As soon as she left, Bumpy called his guys up: Nat, Finley, Junie, Hoss,
6 and 8.
Stubby, Steve, Obadiah, Richie, and George for a meeting.
What happened to 6 and 8?
I don't see Stick and 8 here. Maybe he was in jail.
He was doing 5 to 10.
Very good. Very good. No, Your Honor.
That's just my name.
Yeah. It was his way of telling people he was 14. Like, I'm 6 and 8.
You do the math.
So he calls up the crew. They're all strapped to the gills, ready for a fight. They're about to go hunting for Flash, but it was already too late. One morning, May 15, 1951, Bumpy went through his usual morning routine, waking up at 5 a.m., eating a breakfast of a raw beaten egg and a glass of milk.
The fuck?
That's Mark Wahlberg's routine.
Yeah, kissing his wife goodbye and heading out to work.
With that nasty breath?
Yeah.
Raw eggs and milk.
Is that Jerry? Throughout the weeks prior, various drug enforcement agents had been trying to set Bumpy up, asking him where they could score smack. But he'd just laugh in their faces and move on. But this morning, he was stopped by James Chappell, a narcotics agent. He explained that he and his partner needed to bring Bumpy into the Narcotics Bureau for questioning. Early the next morning, Bumpy's lawyer, Lindenbauer, called Mamie to let her know that Bumpy was being charged with selling drugs. His wife denies that he was ever directly selling drugs and maintains that he'd been set up by Flash. Bumpy's friend Nat bailed him out of jail with $25,000. Mamie had that much cash in the house ready to go, but they didn't want to attract too much attention from the feds. She found out that Flash had been picked up by the cops for selling an ounce of heroin in December 1950.
Holy shit.
He told the officers a story about having been selling drugs for Bumpy. They offered Flash a deal for spilling his guts about Bumpy's supposed drug dealing, and he took it and sang like a canary. While some of the narcotics officers saw holes in Flash's story, the feds on the case saw an opportunity. If they could put the heat on Bumpy, perhaps he would flip on the big dealers in Harlem and they could wipe out the drug trade. Trying to catch the big fish here, you know what I mean?
Right, and then they could move in and sell their drugs.
That's right.
Bumpy got a new hotshot lawyer named Ben Lowenberg, who tried to get the whole case thrown out, but was stymied by the feds. Federal prosecutor William O'Brien had all the local papers calling Bumpy Johnson the most dangerous man in New York. Lowenberg was filling in as many motions as possible to keep the case delayed. Jet magazine reported on Bumpy's activities in their Celebrity People section in 1952. The actual trial got postponed until June 1953, at which time Bumpy was 47 years old. While he was out on bail, and even during the trial, Bumpy felt certain that he would be found not guilty. His confidence was misplaced. After a 3-day trial, a judge found him guilty, and a jury found him guilty, and a judge ended up sentencing him to 15 years. He appealed his sentence all the way to the Supreme Court, but they refused to hear his case. In 1954, Bumpy is mentioned in Jet magazine's crime section. The writer notes that he's beginning his sentence after he lost his appeal. Bumpy was first sent to Leavenworth in Kansas. He was there for a little more than a year before being transferred to Alcatraz.
Fuck.
Just
out
outside.
of the frying pan and into the fryer? Is that
Yeah.
Bad to worse.
Yeah.
He had some issues with the authority figures at Leavenworth and Alcatraz, but eventually he settled down and kept to himself, so long as nobody bothered him. Even while incarcerated, he still held sway over his associates on the outside. He was still making deals and presiding over disagreements from his cell. He requested a transfer to Lewisburg prison in 1958. Inmates there were allowed more visitors than at Alcatraz, but instead...
Yeah. Row over.
Instead, he was transferred to Atlanta. In December, the warden wrote to the director of prisons about Bumpy, describing his disobedient, hostile, resentful, and almost insanely race-conscious.
Oh, you... Who would have thought?
Insanely.
Yeah. Like a madman.
Whites, blacks, Latinos.
I don't think like that.
I'm not insane.
After a series of violent altercations with other inmates and staff, Bumpy was returned to Alcatraz in September 1959.
Fuck.
On June 11, 1962, Frank Morris and brothers J.W. and Clarence Anglin made the only escape from Alcatraz that is successful. Many escapes have been attempted in the past, but because Alcatraz sits on an island, you need a boat to make your way to the mainland. In the 1989 book Riddle of the Rock, the only successful escape from Alcatraz, a former Alcatraz prisoner, Joe Carnes, said that he told the guys to solicit help from Bumpy with their escape attempt. Bumpy had strong enough connections on the outside to secure a boat, for instance.
No way.
Yeah, I know a guy with a boat. San Francisco.
I don't know anything about paper mache or dummy models, but I can get you a boat.
Mamie asked Bumpy about it in later years. He'd only say that he'd been friends with one of the guys that escaped, and he always tried to help a friend, especially when the price was right.
No way.
January 1963, Bumpy was transferred to Lewisburg Prison in Pennsylvania. He was at Lewisburg for less than a month when he was informed that he was going to be released on mandatory parole, or what was called mandatory release at the time. On May 4th, 1963, Bumpy was traveling back home to Harlem. He was 58 years old. Word spread through the neighborhoods of Bumpy's arrival, and an impromptu parade broke out on 7th Avenue.
Oh, my God.
Waves of people following Bumpy's Cadillac, cheering and throwing ticker tape. His long absence from Harlem had created a serious power vacuum that led to a lot of infighting and chaos among the criminal set. Mamie had also been raising Elise's daughter, Margaret, for her after she skipped town. Margaret called Mamie Mama and Bumpy Daddy. She thought they were her biological parents until she was 6. Bumpy was still running a dozen spots where gamblers could place numbers bets, but he didn't reopen a bank himself. He also opened an exterminating business, Palmetto's Chemicals on 2nd Avenue. He went into business with a guy who owned a restaurant and bar supply company. Life was good again. One of his favorite pastimes was betting at the Belmont racetrack. He wrote a poem about the joys of spending an afternoon at the racetrack with his beautiful wife. It appeared in an issue of Crisis magazine. Friends, and that included lady friends, often accompanied Bumpy to the track as well. He'd always been a womanizer, and after being locked up for so many years, he certainly wanted to make up for lost time.
Oh, God.
In 1965,
Checkers.
Mamie found out that one of Bumpy's girlfriends and track buddies was the film star and singer Lena Horne.
Wow.
Oh.
Still got it, this Bumpy.
She stayed with Bumpy, but she refused to watch another Lena Horne movie ever in her life. Bumpy was now Harlem's de facto ruler, even though he was now in his 60s, no longer the young scrapper he'd once been. In the afternoons, he did business from a club on 135th Street, sitting in a back booth to be approached by his subjects. People came to him in need of a handout or a job opportunity. Total Godfather shit.
Yeah.
Gangsters and wannabe gang leaders came to him to settle their disputes or offer advice. Politicians came to him to get out the black vote. Black militants came to him for program funding. In February of 65, Bumpy went around to all the businesses, gangsters, and East Side Italians soliciting funds for Malcolm X's funeral. A couple of years after he got out, he heard that New York Charlie, the pimp who had pointed him out to the cops, was back in New York. His body was, anyway. He had died of a heart attack, and his family wanted to bury him in his hometown.
New York.
Mamie discovered that Bumpy had some kids procure him a bucket of horse manure. He was planning to dump it in the coffin.
Oh, my God.
Mamie and his buddy Junie were able to talk him out of it.
Procured him some horse manure.
Yeah.
Manure! I hate manure. New York Charlie hated manure, dude.
Charlie, yeah. Fuck, man.
He just, we're like, during the funeral, he just walks up there and
Yeah. It's like, if you thought it was bad when I cut his face up, check this out.
just sleep with the shit.
I hate this dude.
In case anybody was wondering.
Yeah. I'm gonna piss on the motherfucker.
Well,
Damn.
the horses.
So nasty. So yeah, they talked him out of the horse manure caper. And around 65 to 66, Mamie started noticing Frank Lucas, who she called an illiterate country bumpkin, hanging around Bumpy, washing his car and taking out the trash at Palmetto's and running errands. She speculated that Bumpy kept him around for comic relief, though he never respected him.
Oh, my God.
An article printed in New York Magazine claimed that Frank Lucas had been Bumpy's bodyguard and driver for over 15 years, but the math doesn't add up. Bumpy was never out of prison for 15 years in a row, the entire time he lived in New York. Meanwhile, not everyone in law enforcement was looking the other way when it came to Bumpy. Narcotics officers continued to surveil him, his home, and his businesses night and day. In December of 65, he staged a sit-down strike at a police station protesting the surveillance operation against him. He was charged with refusing to leave a police station, but the judge acquitted him. Well,
refusing to leave a police station.
We're trying to get you in here, but not this way.
Yeah, you can't stay here.
Until we bring you here.
You got to go out there and do stuff so we can bring you in here.
Oh, you've stayed here too long. I guess you're staying here now.
Yeah, you know what? You're coming in. I'm gonna have to bring you in.
I'm here.
All right, guys, good job.
All right, walk him out. Walk him in.
You got to get out of here, dude.
If you
Get over here.
While he was in Alcatraz, the doctors told him that he had a bum heart.
That's not nice.
Signs of his declining health weren't all that noticeable until early '67. In February, he suffered from a major heart attack. Thankfully, a heroin dealer named Charlie Coles had been seeing him leaning against his Cadillac, clutching his heart.
Now I know that look.
And he got him to a hospital in time. I was like,
What did you give him?
luckily
heroin?
a heroin dealer was there. All right, strap in, pal.
And we don't mean
God, that heroin dealer.
Doesn't hurt so bad anymore, huh?
That's pretty good, right? Come and see me when you get out.
In March, he was at the Aqueduct racetrack with his buddy Big Bobby Jones when he suddenly keeled over. Big Bobby scooped him up in his arms like a baby and carried him to his car and then drove him to the Queens Hospital.
where he met a heroin dealer.
They wanted to keep him overnight for observation, but Bumpy checked himself out. In May, he had another heart attack while having lunch at a restaurant on 125th Street, also with Bobby Jones. This time, Bobby took him to Harlem Hospital, but again, Bumpy refused to be kept overnight. I don't know what's going on, dude.
He didn't like the look of the place.
Sadly, just a few months later, Bumpy got arrested for drug dealing, but this time he'd actually done it.
Yikes.
Since about 65, Bumpy had been dabbling in the drug trade, but cocaine, not heroin. Come on.
He's 65?
Yeah.
Man. I mean, he's forefront of the.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a trailblazer.
Yeah.
This shit's going to be huge in 15 years.
Your kids are gonna love it.
Yeah.
A lot.
It took Bumpy a while, but he made his own connection with some Peruvian suppliers. On July 8th, 1967, 2 DEA agents approached Bumpy, telling him they needed him to come downtown. Instead of complying like he would in the 50s, Bumpy made a run for it. He led up police on a car chase all the way to the Van Wyck Expressway, heading for Queens when they finally forced him off the road. He jumped out of his car and tried to fight the responding officers. Allegedly, it took 6 men to get him down. This guy with a
Damn.
fucking bum
Wow,
kicker.
it only took 3 when he was a kid.
You learned
Yeah.
a few things.
Yeah.
Chess.
Yes. It took him a bishop.
He was indicted along with 5 Peruvians, and his bail was set at $50,000, which made me put up with no trouble. He hired a new lawyer, Samuel Segal, to fight the drug case, and roughly the next year, things were quiet. He manages legitimate businesses, number spots, held court at the restaurant. But it was said in later years that he was disillusioned with the criminal lifestyle. He saw how drugs and violence had torn apart the lives of so many people in Harlem, and it made him do a lot of reflecting on his life and legacy. On July 7th, 1968, he was at a Wells restaurant at close to 2 a.m. A waitress had just served him a plate with a chicken leg and hominy grits and a cup of coffee. He fell over and clutched his chest. He was deceased before they could get him to the hospital. He was 62 years old.
Fourth heart attack?
Thousands of people attended his funeral at St. Martin's Church on 122nd and Lenox. Because he'd been under indictment for drugs, most of his celebrity friends like Ossie Davis, Lena Horne, Duke Ellington, and Sidney Poitier stayed away. But Sugar Ray Robinson and Joe Louis were there. Bumpy is buried at the Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. He made millions of dollars of cash in his life. He earned the respect of the powerful and the famous. He got arrested more than 40 times and spent many of his best years behind bars.
Yeah.
He was a man of many contradictions, but his death marked the end of an era in Harlem and New York City as a whole. And I just think, there's some stuff here. You find a much more gentlemanly side than a lot of these gangsters.
Right.
Of course, he's a maniac, but there's also this thing too, where he's a little guy. He's just a plucky fucking bastard, and he just gets to the top by being having the balls. He's just got the fucking balls. He was just really good about taking care of everybody.
Yeah.
And in this story, there's just not much betrayal or snitching, really.
Right.
For a gangster story too. And like I said, I love it because it's he is one of the Luciano again. He was extradited, I think.
Yes.
Or deported. I think he was deported.
By.
Yeah, I think he was deported because
to Italy.
Yeah, because he wasn't a full citizen, and that was the only way they could get rid of him. And I think maybe they did it in conjunction with the prison sentence. As soon as you get out, you're getting out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But another guy that lived, basically to his death, staying a gangster from Italy, and it's quite a legacy.
Yeah, that whole like era of Harlem is like we mentioned in the beginning. So there's a couple of movies,
Yeah.
but there's not the romanticism that you get with the Italian American mob.
Oh, certainly,
Yeah,
right.
but
yeah.
there's so many stories to tell.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does creep in though quite a bit. I don't know how much it was known, like how much his name rang out in New York, and if that faded or whatever.
It seemed like at least in Harlem, you get out of jail for 10 years, they throw you a parade.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I mean, you guys have never done that for me.
No.
There's a character in Shaft named Bumpy Jonas.
Ah.
In '72, there's a movie called Come Back Charleston Blue. The title character is loosely based on Bumpy. He's a criminal with a positive influence on the community.
I mean, he was in the celebrity and the crime sections of Jet. Had a poem published in Crisis, which was like I believe I think it was a black magazine, but about civil rights, I think.
Yeah. He was portrayed in Escape from Alcatraz, of course. Lawrence Fishburne played him twice, once in Hoodlum and also in a 1984 film called The Cotton Club.
No shit.
Yeah.
Who should we get to play Bumpy? Who's played him before? Oh, that's Fishburne.
In '89, Unsolved Mysteries told viewers it was Bumpy who helped them escape Alcatraz.
No way.
And then, like I said, in the episode of The Wire, the All Due Respect episode, there's a bunch of characters just talking about Bumpy Johnson. And, of course, American Gangster, that's where it started. But it was after that movie came out that I think it motivated Mamie Johnson to come out and be like, all right, I'm going to give my side because this Frank Lucas guy is full of shit here.
Right.
They wrote a book called Harlem Godfather, The Rap on My Husband, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. It was with her and writer Karen Quinones Miller. And it's currently the only full biography in print. And it definitely gets into the misconceptions, particularly about Frank Lucas. She would live only a year after the book's publication. She died in May 2009 at 94 years old.
Wow.
When the UK electronic music act Prodigy was released from prison in 2011, he titled his first release the Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson EP, followed by the Bumpy Johnson album.
Are you kidding me?
No.
The Smack My Bitch Up guy?
Yeah.
Cut my clothes up, guy.
Yeah.
And then comes a character based on Bumpy in the game Mafia 3, and then comes the Godfather of Harlem series. And here's a little look at the man and his mug shots, Aaron.
There he is. It's a normal guy. Now, in this one, he looks like a woman.
Yeah. That's
Mamie.
This one, he looks like a woman. Nice.
And we'll get those up on the Patreon.
Nice fur.
Good guy.
He doesn't really look that different. What's we got to wonder the age of all of these. Oh, 54, 59.
Yeah. There's the 47 one. He did the 10 years. And yeah, he was arrested over 40 times, so you can really have a pretty good selection.
Yeah.
You can do a flip book of mug shots and watch Mage in real time.
But of course, this was compiled by the excellent and beautiful Laura Crawford.
Thank you,
be
Laura.
to her.
Fantastic job.
And it was just so much fun.
Yeah,
I really
it's a good
enjoyed.
one.
I enjoyed getting to know the Bumpster.
Me too.
Yeah, we've done a few about Harlem eccentrics now.
Yeah,
a lot of some mobsters.
Yeah,
one cult man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those and then the two brothers that had their little nests.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
and you've got a Bumpy Johnson yourself.
I do. Yeah,
currently. It'll go away.
Yeah.
On its own.
Play chess with it.
God willing.
Use the bishop.
Yeah, them playing chess weekly was a real delight to
that's
find
cool.
out.
Yes,
about.
that's very fun.
I loved that.
Yeah.
And I love this thing where he just fucking slices people up with knives like a motherfucker.
Yeah.
I mean, what a fucking lunatic.
Slice him, dice him.
Yeah.
Pulling the guy's fucking eye out and saying he wants spaghetti and meatballs? Ooh.
That's how you get on Luciano's good side.
Yeah. You know what this fucking prick says to the guy who's on the ground?
He says he wants some fucking spaghetti and meatballs. Oh, dude, I love this fucking black guy.
Yeah. Guy gets out of the hospital, they put his eye back in his fucking head. He goes with a gun. He's eating the spaghetti, the fucking guy. He's eating the meatballs. He shoots him, it goes through his fucking hat. It shoots this broad. She's dead, down on the ground. Bumpy says, I'll never wear a hat again.
Can you believe the balls on this fucking black guy?
Well, that's it. We did it, gentlemen.
All right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, super
job.
fun. Thank you again, Laura. We love you.
Mhm.
I'm going to say goodnight. My name is John Fahey.
I'm Aaron Pita.
Rapper Soap.
Good night, everybody. We love you.
Good night.